You just made the list! Tell me when I'm telling lies!
Let me in.
Hey, it's the Toxic Ring Scandal featuring TBK the Turnbuckle King. Got another good one for you guys today. Gonna talk about what happened to Chris Jericho, how he went from being a demigod to beta. We're gonna talk about Chris Jericho, how his career was so good even when he went to AEW, and how it has not been the same as recent memory. So there'll be a couple of things I'm going to cover that I'll mention, and there'll be some stuff that interviews and also some footage of some stuff about Chris Jericho. May have a little troubling past there, but let's talk about it. Let's indeed go to get our seats at the locker room, and as usual, it's time to air the dirty laundry. So let's go in. Now, what we talk about here, we're talking about Chris Jericho, the legendary Chris Jericho, who's been known to be one of the best ever in the game, an accomplished world champion for many, many years. He's been the first ever undisputed WWE champion. He's also been a world heavyweight champion. He's been the AEW champion, and now it goes all the way down to being the FTW champion. This is sad, but what happened to this man? We knew Chris Jericho. I mean, he's one of the best ever, and what I like about Chris Jericho, he's definitely one of the best too, able to change with times, never stay stale, always adapting to brand new character, always adapting to brand new storyline, whatever the case may be. Chris Jericho was always Chris Jericho. But with that being said, let's see what's coming to the locker room before I go in on Mr. Chris Jericho. Brutally honest, good breath, salute to you. I'm coming out. CeeLo Myers, I gotta get you a wrench, man. I don't know which account you be on CeeLo and the other one. But I'm going to get you a wrench, man. I forget about you. Appreciate your support since the beginning, my brother. But yeah, we're going to definitely get into it. Anybody is, we know Chris Jericho, like I said, has been a very well-accomplished world champion. We know that. We know, but despite all that, even when he first came to AEW, he was similar. Like, again, he is also, we know this is when he adapted again. He started doing the Judas as his finisher. He had his own theme song, Feuds. And, he went back from trunks to tights. He became the first ever AEW champion. He defeated Hangman Adam Page at Double or Nothing back in 2019. That inaugural pay-per-view for AEW. So he was on top of the world. He had the Jericho Appreciation Society. First the Inner Circle, then later on Jericho Appreciation Society. So many men under his wing. He had Santana, Jake Hagar, mostly Sammy Guevara. He had all the people under his umbrella. Made people look good. The women had Anna Jay and Tay Mello and others. Just had plenty of people under his wing. And, he was still involved with storylines, still doing his thing. So it's just crazy how it all went downhill since then. I mean, it's Jericho, just one thing after another with this man. But like I said, despite all of that, I know that he's been doing his thing with AEW. Didn't really hear nothing about him much during his career. The only thing that did mess him up, was recent memory. Also, I'm on X right now. We'll stay on here for the first 15 minutes. After that, we'll say our goodbyes to X. And then we will continue on to watch the rest of the stream. Come on to Top Ring Scandal, aka KDH, on YouTube. And also, let's get those likes up. Let's get the likes up. Like, subscribe, and keep the notification bell on when I do go live. Also, too, with Chris Jericho, like I said, he's like I said, first ever AEW champion. But we gotta remember, his career, even though he was getting older, it started winding down. And the thing about it is, we saw this. When it did happen, a lot of people were shocked, including me. We didn't know that this could happen. We would hear that with Chris Jericho. We hear names. We hear about maybe a Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan. Those names we're not really surprised. With Chris Jericho, that situation happened. It was surprising. And what do I mean by that? I'm talking about if you guys remember, back in December of last year, late last year, he had the allegation. I actually covered it on here at the Locker Room News. And it was with a former AEW wrestler. And ever since I covered this live, ever since I, read the whole allegation, and ever since this happened, Chris Jericho's career has not been the same since then. And we're now in late April. And he still has not rebounded from it, because it's like every time, it's like, I don't know, I think it just slowed him down. Literally, not to mock what he's saying, but ever since that happened, he's honestly, he's been on his own list.
You just made the list!
He made his own list. And ever since this happened, it has not been the same at all. So ever since this happened, I know one thing after the other happened to him. If you remember at this incident, since this allegation happened back in December, remember shortly after, I believe it was the same day or the day after, remember, he had there was a event, a first time pay-per-view. Remember, he had World's End, and we were going to talk about how he got booed at AEW Dynasty. But if you guys remember, at the event at AEW's World End back December, which was literally around the same time this allegation went down, he was not, and I mean not, getting the best reception from the fans at all. Not the best reception. And then some of the fans, they stuck up for Jericho, some didn't. It was just crazy. I know at the event, World's End, he came out, one fan was screaming and all that and saying whatever, and you could hear the boos in the background.
Do it! Woo! You fucking crybabies! You want to cancel everybody! You fucking pansies!
Yeah, so that was back in December, and that fan you heard in the background was screaming, saying, "You crybabies, you want to cancel everybody." Like I said, Chris Jericho, despite the fan yelling in the background, did not get the best reception. Everyone was not happy to see Jericho when he came out, and he was getting booed then back in December. And then you thought, with this allegation, when it did go down back in December, now, don't get me wrong, there was no evidence to hear that Chris Jericho did this. There was no evidence on there. There was, no proof he did anything. It did not go as far as, for example, the whole Vince McMahon, situation currently going on. It didn't go on. Don't get me wrong. We didn't hear her name ever again. And they say she went as far as that she was lying. But the fact of the matter is, Chris Jericho has not rebounded since then. And what I mean too, remember, he didn't just only get booed at AEW's World End in December. He was also booed at the recent event, which was this past Sunday at AEW Dynasty pay-per-view. Another first-time AEW pay-per-view. And Chris Jericho, I noticed he went through a change around this time recently. There was no more Fozzy, a theme song, him sing along with the fans. There was no more him calling himself, the demigod or any other character, sexy beast, whatever he called himself. He was calling himself the Lionheart back to the 90s in the WCW days. And also similar to AEW's World Dynasty, they was even worse reception than it was at AEW's World End, with his match with Hook for the FTW Championship match. They was telling him, please retire. Please retire.
He get a couple. He might get the win here. I don't want to see him win the FTW title.
I get that, but man, well, at least they're to their.
So yeah, they was telling him, please retire, please retire. And this is Chris Jericho. This is a legend. It's not just to anybody. This is not no scrub off the street. It's not no rookie. This ain't no, this ain't no slouch. This is Chris Jericho, who's been wrestling for over 30 years. This is Chris Jericho, who's been a multiple-time world champion. This is Chris Jericho, who's not only been AEW, he's been in WWE. He had stints in New Japan. He's been in WCW. This man wrestled all around the country for years. He's wrestled some of the biggest names in the wrestling industry for years, like from the likes of Stone Cold, The Rock, Triple H, recently, AJ Styles, Kenny Omega, Adam Page. He wrestled CM Punk. He wrestled the best of the best in the business, and he's getting booed like that. So that's not good at all. Yeah, CeeLo, damn Chris. Yeah, they booed him very bad, and I believe that for Chris Jericho, I talk about how he's always want to adapt. I think, I believe he went through the recent character change of the going from what he was doing to the Lion Tamer. I think he changed because of his allegations, and honestly, I believe as well. I think it ruined his confidence. It slowed him down. I think he did that to get the fans back on his side. He thought going through a character change, a tire change, theme song change, or at least revert back to an old character change, I should say in this case. He thought it would help his career, the fans would get back on his side, and it didn't. And it's definitely a fail. And unfortunately, it's not just anything to say this is true. It is going far to say that this is not helping him at all. This is making things much, 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 much worse for Chris Jericho's career. So I don't know what the case may be with this man. I mean, we know Chris is good. We know Chris is dope, but his career just never rebounded, and I don't think it ever will, because he gets so late in his career. And he went from, like I said before, he went from being world champ to doing everything. It goes down to this. He is not an FTW champion. Even in this photo, he don't look the same. He don't. Just not the same with this man at all. I mean, Chris Jericho don't have that much more time left. They even tell you to retire already. I mean, and maybe, for the case of fans, for your reputation, whatever you have left of it, maybe for the sake of fans, sake of your reputation, sake of your career, maybe you should retire Chris Jericho. And that's undisputed.
And that is undisputed.
Maybe you should hang up the boots. Maybe you should let it go. Because your time is up. It's definitely up. Zone 864 TV, salute to you. Thanks for coming out, brother. Had a good live earlier. Check out Zone 864 TV for personal vlogs where he gets deep personally. But let's get back to Mr. Chris Jericho. I just don't see how he can rebound. And the thing about it is, since social media is so big today, we thought with the allegations back in December, it would be the first of Chris Jericho get into some type of trouble. But unfortunately, it's not. It's not the first time this man got in any kind of trouble. Chris Jericho, his troubles start back to the 90s. And it was this footage that was a hidden camera that was sent to me through a very reliable source. So this is Chris Jericho in this clip, and he just acting a fool. So with that being said, let's roll the footage.
a.m. And after a few beers, Chris Jericho, a star with World Championship Wrestling, drags ring announcer David Pencer around the hotel. He rips off his shirt, but that wasn't the end. A few minutes after these scenes, Pencer was stripped naked in the middle of the lobby. We saw a wild world of partying all night, drinking, and an endless supply of groupies. This fan proudly showed the wrestlers the tattoo.
So what you saw, guys, that was on Inside Edition. They were showing Chris Jericho in the bar. He got into a fight, pulled somebody's shirt off, and he was just acting reckless with the woman. They even showed her buttocks and everything. And he was acting crazy since the 90s. As it said, Chris Jericho back at WCW. Most of us know that WCW does not exist today. So when we hear WCW, we're going to know it's back to early 90s or mid to late 90s. And it's 2024. So this stuff went back to 30 years ago, or close to 30, or over 30 years ago. So this man has definitely got some skeletons in his closet. Now, I know people going to say that was just a bar fight, no big deal. He's young, he was having fun, no big deal. You know, you're blowing this whole proportion. Actually, I'm not. But, you know, we're going to see what else. DDE, salute to you. Welcome to the locker room, man. Make sure you get your seat, man. Seats were getting filled up. But, yeah, he was acting crazy back then during those times. And the crazy part about it is, when he was acting crazy around those times, he just was not. It blew over because there was no social media back then. We got to take account to that. We got to take account that Chris Jericho was nowhere near the name he is now. Chris Jericho was much younger. He didn't have the name value he has now. And, you know, he was nowhere near established, not just name-wise, but, of course, established as a wrestler like he is currently today. He's, 53, I believe, well-established. Doesn't have to wrestle if he doesn't want to, but maybe in this case, due to the boos and the reception from the fans, maybe he should give it a consideration if he doesn't do it off the bat. But I would say, Chris Jericho, we hear that he's well-liked by many of his peers, and very well he may be, but there are some who had issues with Jericho. And I'm not just referring to Goldberg and Jericho fight back in early 2000s. I'm not even referring back to the face-to-face altercation that almost came to blows to Brock Lesnar back in 2016. I'm not talking about that either. I'm talking about other stuff than that. This is a while back. I don't think it's that old, but I know that that someone spoke on Mr. Chris Jericho. He was in WWE. I believe he is retired now, or should be at least. And he has some stuff to say about Mr. Chris Jericho, and it wasn't pleasant. And what do I mean? I'm talking, if you guys remember, he was mostly a tag team competitor. He was mostly on SmackDown. Paul London, he was on the Rene Dupree podcast, and he has some very interesting things to say about Mr. Chris Jericho, Mr. Alatola Rock and Roller, the man of 1,004 holds. That's early WCW day, guys. But I will play that clip now and see what he has to say about Mr. Chris Jericho. Give me 1 second.
Absolutely. Love Stevie.
Chris Jericho.
I'm trying not to censor or mute myself now, but Don't always meet your heroes. You know? Don't always meet your heroes.
Batista.
I love Jericho as a kid.
Yeah.
As you start to work with guys, you see different sides of them.
I'm not trying to cut you off. I just didn't know if you wanted to continue.
I mean, no. He'll talk about himself enough, I'm sure. What am I going to add to it? Batista, you said? Batista?
Now that's Paul London. I thought that was on Renee Dupree's show. This is somebody else's podcast, but I know he really hadn't much to say about him. Paul London's trying to be polite about it, but he was saying that don't meet your heroes, and Chris Jericho talks too much about himself, implying that Chris Jericho's full of himself, maybe because he got that rock and roll persona. He is definitely not feeling Chris Jericho at all. Did not like this dude at all. I mean, he definitely did not want to be a fan of Chris Jericho. So he pretty much, Chris Jericho was on his list.
You just made the list!
So this is one small case of it. But I do know that later on, recent memory, I do know that Chris Jericho had an altercation with MVP, and Dutch Mantel talks about on his podcast. Allegedly, Chris Jericho, they got to a fist fight, and MVP gave him that work. So let's see what Dutch Mantel had to say about Mr. Chris Jericho. We'll get that up in a second.
We have one more bit of news to go through, and then we're going to go into our main event, and it's Chris Jericho versus MVP boat fight. But I actually forgot to write anything about this. Have you heard this?
Yes, I've heard it. I heard it when it happened.
Did you really?
I heard something about it.
Well, tell us what you heard then.
Well, I heard, Jericho, he books wrestling shows on a cruise ship, and they appear, I guess, nightly during the entertainment. They present a wrestling show, so he books it. And of course, they book bands and they book all this other stuff too. But I heard he booked MVP, and they had somewhat of an argument, and it got out of hand, and I think a tussle broke out. You like that word, tussle? A tussle broke out, and I heard that MVP knocked Mr. Jericho out. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. I wasn't there, but that's what I heard. And that's what you asked me, right?
That's exactly what I was asking about, yeah.
So I fulfill my part of the contract. You asked me a question, I gave the answer as I know it. So somebody can say, let me ask you, somebody can say, that's a lie, Dutch, that's a lie. Well, let me ask you this. Is it a lie if I believe something happened, but it didn't? Is it a lie? It can't be a lie then, right?
Get semantic with me, Dutch.
Well, that's what I heard.
So you heard this at the time then? 2020, this I think supposedly happened.
Right. I don't know when I heard it, but I did hear it.
Yeah, because apparently this has only come public yesterday. I think this went public, but I didn't realize.
Public, yes. Underground, in the wrestling underground, I heard about it.
So no other information then. You just heard that MVP knocked Jericho out.
That's what I heard.
No reasons for it?
I don't know why. They got an argument about something, most likely over money. Probably.
So Dutch Mantel, he talks about the whole Chris Jericho situation with MVP, and he said allegedly could have been over money. Back in 2020 over a cruise, Chris Jericho, as he stated, booked shows, and MVP was part of it. So it must have been an issue over money, booking, whatever the case may be. But I do know this. I know that pretty much MVP was interviewed about it. And I know Jericho didn't really speak on it, but pretty much MVP pretty much confirmed it. He said at the end of this interview with Chris Van Fleet.
It's true. It's true.
So there you go. He said it's true. Yep. So yeah, it's definitely crazy. Jordan Kirby, welcome to locker. You said what's MVP involvement? He knocked out Chris Jericho allegedly at a boat, and it was over booking. I guess Chris Jericho was booking. I guess MVP was a part of it, according to Dutch Mantel. And as you see that small clip, MVP confirmed that he said it's true, and he put up his fist and he knocked out Chris Jericho. So yeah, this is wild though. But like I said, I know too that Chris Jericho's always been something involving him. It's always been some fights, all of that. So I don't know. Chris Jericho it's been wild with him. Period. But yeah, we got Chris Jericho. Like I said, I think with all these with the allegation, with the fights, with his career, the booing, it's just his career has not been the same since then. His career has not been the same since then. I don't even know if he's going to rebound from this, because we know him as the AEW World Champ. We knew him as the ROH Champ, all of that, leading stables, creating stables, but he just not has been the same at all. And like I said, Chris Jericho, we heard some things about him, but it's getting worse and worse. And I don't think there's anything that could be done to, that can salvage, can help what's left of his career. Now I know too that also Chris Jericho was known to work stiff with the late Chyna. I've heard of that too. I know Jim Ross on his podcast, he talks about Chris Jericho and how he was allegedly stiff with Chyna. I know Jericho said it himself that he was not a fan of work with Chyna. I don't know, that's why he got stiff with her, but that's definitely was a case as well. So I know he did an interview on that, and it was wild though. I know he talked about this on his podcast a while back. He talked about this whole thing. Now, 1 second, I can have that where he talked about that as well. We'll talk about that in a moment. But Chris Jericho, he just, you got a lot of dirt to your name. Leto talks about Chris Jericho and Chyna situation. So let's see, I'll pull that up right now. Let's see what he has to say about it.
I want to mention Jericho gets put in a feud with China, which is where supposedly the heat comes from. He's supposed to bump and feed for her, but when he accidentally busts her face up, he gets heat for quote unquote working too stiff.
Yeah.
Do you remember this incident and any potential fallout from him? And do you ever wind up having a conversation with him about it, since you are running talent relations?
We may have chatted about it or said, look, you get some heat on him because China's politically connected. I think she was dating Triple H at the time. And so he rode in with his white horse and rescued her. It was a potato. It was inadvertent. He didn't go out to hurt her. He didn't intend to hurt her. It just happened. And let's also be honest about it. I had hours of conversations with Joni over the years, especially in the last year or so of her career there. She was not Jack Briscoe. She was not Triple H. And so anything that went awry, I'm sure he was going to hear about it from her. And, that's why I've always said, wrestling relationships are very daunting. They seldom work, but, and some have. Like his Triple H's marriage to Stephanie's been beautiful. They got, I think, 3 beautiful daughters. So, but I just said, you're going to get some heat over this dude. But Jericho was undaunted. You couldn't intimidate the little bastard. He was fearless. And he knew that it was a potato. They happen all the time in wrestling. And, so I don't think it bothered him a hell of a lot. I'm sure he apologized like a pro would. Other than that, it was kind of one-dimensional. Source of consternation was from one person.
Review match, and Chris Jericho wins the Intercontinental title from China. That's a real sentence. Meltzer would say this was actually the best wrestling match on the show, which is a real credit to Jericho because China was really exposed with her bad-looking offense, particularly the forearms, which she needs to retire from her repertoire. Jericho had to sell her bouncing off the ropes like someone beginning wrestling school. So he was pretty critical here. He, Big Meltzer, pronouns pal. After the match, China interrupted Jericho's interview and told him that she was the better wrestler last month, but he was this month, and shook his hand. 2.25 stars. So it's pretty cool. It's a big deal for Jericho to win the Intercontinental title, but it's probably not the way he envisioned it. He won it from China.
Yeah. Well, nobody envisioned it.
Yeah.
One of the things, and this is going to get heat on me, I know, but let the hide go with the towel, as they say in the country. I've never been a big fan of intergender matches. I think they very easily become very hard to buy, hard to believe, and there's safety issues. Jericho had to dumb his game down to have the match get 2.5 stars from Meltzer in this thing. He had to back off a little bit. He couldn't do everything he wanted to do. He sure couldn't work as snug as he normally worked. That was one of his calling cards. And I think the audience will love that. They attached to that. So I'm just not a big fan of those intergender matches. But because of Triple H's influence and his relationship with China and his relationship with Vince, she got a lot of a lot of breaks. And without a doubt, I remember somebody telling Austin and I were talking, and I just screwing with him. Said, I think they're going to do a big program with you in China. Boy, that son of a bitch went off on me. I made it up. I was just screwing with him. As they say in New York City, I was busting balls. And that was a relationship Steve and I had then and still do now. We have fun with each other. So I think that she got moved along too fast, and the intergender shit. Now, the Russo would love the intergender stuff because it was an attraction. It was a gimmick. And just me, and it's not Russo, but just my personal taste is I didn't like intergender matches. And there's going to be somebody that's going to hear this, JR, you're behind the times and all that stuff. It's just not realistic. in a lot of ways. So that's kind of where we were with that. She was on the right side of the aisle with China, and she got a break that a lot of the boys, I had to listen to it. They wish they had. They wish they'd got that break. They wish they had been Intercontinental Champion. Instead, it was a woman, which is going to sound very unpolitically correct for me to say that. I get that too. So I apologize if I offend anybody with that remark. It is a personal preference. I'd rather not be engaged in an intergender match. And maybe I am too old school. To me, though, it just doesn't seem realistic.
In Jericho's book, he talks about a meeting on Raw the next day between you, Vince, Chris, and Jack Lanza, and you're discussing Jericho's work. This meeting obviously isn't a surprise to you. Your quote unquote office at the time. Do you remember this meeting and why it was necessary?
Oh, vaguely I remember it, but it was necessary because Vince had been convinced that Jericho was careless and that he wasn't safe. He wasn't safe with one woman in an intergender match. Are you kidding? So, yeah, I remember that. Now, you know, going back over all of our notes, as I did last night, I just think that, you know, Vince had to, Vince was then able to go tell Triple H, who we were counting on, he was becoming a huge star, great heel, that I talked to Jericho. I got that cleared up. Okay, so that's one squeaky wheel that moves on to something else. So I think that's kind of what it was. Triple H's influence with Vince is strong. And you know, who would have dreamed in that era that he would become Vince's son-in-law?
So Jericho has to apologize to China after the meeting. And as the legend goes from Jericho's book, Vince called Jericho the drizzling shits. It says moving forward, he has to run all of his matches through X-Pac. And Vince says he feels like he was sold a bill of goods.
That was good for me, right? That's slapping me in the face. Here, just hit me again right there if you can, Vince. That'd be good. Slap me with an open hand if you can. Break my eardrum. I didn't like it. Again, it just wasn't objective.
How much of this, and again, we're not, by the way, I want to just take a time out. Shout out to Paul Levesque. We hear that he has made a speedy recovery and he appreciates all the support. We know he had a health event and they're keeping all that close to the vest, but we're so grateful that he's here and his contributions. But we are talking about something that happened 20 years ago, and it does feel like this meeting is maybe Hunter's request. We're talking about this guy was too rough and hurt my girlfriend at the time. And oh, by the way, moving forward, all of your matches need to be run through one of my very best friends, Mr. Sean Waltman.
Hey, look, I love Sean Waltman. God bless him. He's texting me all the time and checking on me. How you feeling? Or, you know, it's always positive feedback. I love this kid. And I was very happy to be able to work with Sean. I think Sean's got a great mind. Vince could have picked we've been challenged to pick a better person to go over Jericho's matches than Sean Waltman, who's a true student of the game and still is. But it was very insulting to Jericho. It was a little bit insulting to me, and not because of X-Pac. The X factor didn't have anything to do with it. It's just the fact that you're neutering and trying to kill the spirit of a guy and I didn't want to see that opportunity go to flush down the toilet because of a personal issue.
So the goofy segment where Jericho and China do a double pin and are named co-intercontinental champion. What do you think old Leroy McGurk would have thought of that creative?
Well, much like the Cowboy, it would never have happened.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have put yourself in that position. That was the sports entertainment side of WWE really becoming more of a profound impact to how we philosophize the shows. Sports entertainment. And certainly that was sports entertainment. It wasn't an athletic, traditional issue. It was sports entertainment. And And look, I ain't bitching about sports entertainment. The sports entertainment business made me a lot of money, and I had 26 great years there at WWE by and large, a few little exceptions, but by and large, it was fine. The checks always cleared, and they came on time, and I got a lot of exposure, blah, blah, blah. But I just felt bad for Chris. But here's the thing about Chris. He hung in there. A lot of guys would say, screw this shit. I don't need somebody to tell me how to work. And they didn't. He's good. Really, he still is really good. He's 50 now. He's still really good. So I felt badly for Chris. But to his credit, he didn't give up the ship. He stayed in the saddle and rode it out. And the good things would then eventually come to him.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast.
Yeah, that is Chris Jericho being mentioned by Jim Ross. Good old JR. Talking about how him and China worked together in the late 90s, how he was still working with her, and that didn't go too well with Vince McMahon. Her boyfriend at the time, we already know, China's boyfriend, Triple H. And I believe, too, since Jim Ross brought this up, he was saying that Chris Jericho he meant no harm into doing that to her, that he didn't mean to do that, and also how I think that Vince McMahon is very upset with Jericho over it. He didn't want to push him, man. I think that explains why Vince McMahon was not high on Jericho, because he was always stiff with women in intergender matches. So that says a lot. But I know Chris Jericho, it was always an on and off history of stuff he's done. Like I said, a bar fight in the 90s, and him not being well liked by Paul London, and the whole stuff with China. Of course, the fight with Goldberg and then Brock Lesnar, he had altercation where it could have really came to blows on that one, and it didn't. So it's always something going on with Jericho. But the point I'm making is it's always some tied to his name, and most of the time it just blows over. It's just now with this case, what's going on with Chris Jericho today, ever since that allegation back in December, it has not been the same for this man. I mean, he went from being the undisputed champion to being the list right before he left WWE. Then, of course, the Rainmaker, New Japan, a little bit AEW, all of that. And then he had an allegation, and it's not been the same for this man since then. I honestly don't think he's ever going to rebound. He can change all the characters that he wants. He can change persona. He can change from trunks to tights, tights to trunks. He can change his hair. He can change everything. Even the people you have around to create another stable. I just don't think things going to get ever right for Chris Jericho like it was previously, because he lost his confidence and he's not there anymore mentally. I think all the allegations that him getting booed has really went down, ruined his career, and now he subdued himself for whatever reason. I know why did he win the FTW Championship at AEW Dynasty, especially in this point in his career. And even if he is putting over Hook later on, or because Hook is leaving, going to free agency, and not coming back to AEW, I don't see how him winning that championship is going to help his career or even help put over someone. I don't think that mess they had should even been for that FTW title, because he looks strange and goofy with this belt at this point. He looks like a fool. Who respects this FTW crappy belt that came from ECW in the 90s, held by Taz? Now his son had it. Now Jericho got it. Let's be honest. I think Jack Perry had it at one time too, before the whole brawl with CM Punk at All In last August. It's just terrible, guys, and it's just a joke. It's a joke. And Chris Jericho, he just don't have that same steam, that same momentum. He don't have it anymore. But other than me, I mean, honestly, do you think that since the allegation has to slow down Chris Jericho's confidence level? And I believe it has, to a great extent of it, because he's not confident. He don't look the same when he comes out. The theme song, I don't see him having the same confidence as he did previously. Everything's been going down. He's come to the Lion Tamer theme, what he did in the 90s. I don't know. But I just don't think Chris Jericho's the same. And like I said, Chris Jericho, one of the best ever in the game to do it. Legend for sure. Definitely, if WWE don't put him in there, definitely a Hall of Famer. Multiple time world champion. Been the best feud. I personally admire his feud with Shawn Michaels back in 2008, when Chris Jericho first reverted to this character, wearing suits and had short haircut. And it was for that same World Heavyweight Championship at the ladder match at No Mercy. One of the best feuds ever, not just of that year or that decade, but ever. It's underrated and one of the best of all time. So I admire what he's done in his career, but I just don't think it's been the same with him. I don't know what you guys think of that. Let's see what you guys have to say about, has the allegations slowed down Mr. Y2J, Alatola Rock'n'Rolla, now back to Lion Tamer Chris Jericho. DDE says right here, he can literally do anything and he will still get the exact same. All you need is one allegation to ruin you. Absolutely. And you're right about that. And that definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, is undisputed.
And that is undisputed.
That's an undisputed answer, none, just to say the least, because Chris Jericho has done it all. He's been at WrestleMania. He's been at All In. He's been at Wrestle Kingdom, New Japan. I think he's done all this stuff, and that one allegation has ruined his career. And even though nothing happened to this woman, like I said, didn't hear her name again, there was no ocular proof on what Chris Jericho's done. He has not rebounded from this whole situation, and that was 4 months ago now. So it just shows that, like Didi just said, no matter what you do in your career, how legendary you are, how well seasoned you are, you know, you can have the best matches, best rivalries, being the best promotion, wrestling promotion. But all it takes is just that one allegation. All it takes is that one woman. All it takes is that one incident, and it's all said and done. And I can tell you that is not a prediction. Not a prediction at all. That's definitely a spoiler.
And that's not a prediction. That's a spoiler.
So I don't know. Now, the question is, should he retire? I think it should he retire now. I don't think he should retire. I think he should take some time off. And he's been in AEW since the beginning, back in 2019. I will say, since his confidence level's not the same as it used to be, it's clearly evident that it hasn't. I would say he needs to take time off, clear his head, and think about what he wants to do next. If he does want to retire, if he does, want to come back, what should he do next? I don't think he should be wrestling right now. Not physical. His physical health is fine. I think his mental health's not fine. Chris Jericho should take some time off from wrestling. It could be approximately 2 months, maybe 3 months, maybe 5 months, 6 months, maybe even a year. But mentally, this man is not there right now. I haven't watched much AEW like I used to, but I don't think he's there. To the point you're getting booed at pay-per-views. You got booed at 2 pay-per-views, World's End and also recently AEW Dynasty. I mean, if I was getting booed, a legend like myself of his caliber, if I was getting booed like this, man, I would not. I would have to think twice about my career. It's similar to the Lita situation with, somewhat, not exactly, but somewhat equivalent to how Lita retired, because the whole Matt Hardy Edge and love triangle ruined her. She was getting booed in public and outs in public. But Chris Jericho, as far as he's concerned, he can boo like this at multiple events.
Woo! You fucking crybabies! You want to cancel everybody! You fucking pants!
He get a couple. He might get the win here. I don't want to see him win the FTW title. I get that, but man, well, at least they're to their knees.
Yeah, so when you get that kind of reception, that's not the best in your favor. Whether you're a babyface or a heel, you probably should evaluate your career and think about what you want to do next, because what you're doing right now, I know you tried everything he could in his power. You didn't, like I said, no allegations, no proof was on you. You changed your character, you changed the theme music, all of that. Your finishers, all of that, your in ring moves, all of that, but it's still missing a problem. The problem is still there. I think he's got to take time off. I mean, look what Jack Perry just did. He was involved in the All In situation back in August of 2023, and he just came back to AEW TV as of yesterday. Now, he was in New Japan for several months, but it takes that long. And that man was gone for 8 months from AEW television. So maybe takes that long to clear your head. So maybe that's something Chris Jericho should consider to do, but it's only up to Chris Jericho. Just take a personal leave. Like I said, it's the physical health is not an issue with Chris Jericho. It is a mental health issue. That can get to you mentally, and it makes you lose confidence and take you off your game. And then at least you're not putting on the best performances in your matches or even your promos or the whole package of being a wrestling superstar or just a wrestler, period. No matter what promotion you're in, whether you're in WWE or AEW or TNA, don't matter. But Chris Jericho, he's going to definitely have to change it up. Take time off, clear your head. And then too, another thing in addition to that, Chris Jericho's never taken time off since he's been with AEW. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I don't think he's ever took a long extended time off. Why not? I mean, everybody else in AEW has, whether it was due to injury or personal issues. Maybe it's Chris Jericho's trying to take time off and think about what he really wants to do, what the rest of his career or what's left of it. Because I know he said in an interview he don't ever plan on retiring. He want to keep wrestling and don't plan to retire ever. So maybe he should think about what he should do next. And I think that'd be best for business, as they say. Best for Chris Jericho, best for his family, and best for his reputation or lack of. So that's what I think should be the case with Chris Y2J. I know you don't call himself that no more, but that's the case it should be, And I think if he does that, maybe things will come around and get better for him, as far as that concerned. So, yeah, guys, other than that, I have nothing else. We covered the recent boos at AEW Dynasty and also World's End, where he first got booed. We also covered, his past of the brawling 90s Inside Edition covered. We also covered, what a wrestler had to say about him, which was nothing good, but not much. Then his altercation with MVP, allegedly back at a vote back in 2020, where MVP pretty much he confirmed that it happened, it was true, and I heard MVP got the upper hand on Jericho. And then of course Jim Ross mentioning him being Chris Jericho being stiff with China back in the 90s. So it was a lot that was covered here at the locker room, but that's all I have regarding the situation. You guys let me know what you think in a live chat. Also on the playback, what happened to Chris Jericho? Will his career ever rebound from the situation, or will it not rebound and maybe he should consider retirement at this point in his career? So I thank you all for coming out tonight. As we leave the locker room, let's get back to what we do. Go to sleep, get ready for the next day because it's a late locker room night. Soon, 2 videos will pop up for Toxic Reigns scandal. The first video will be when Timeless had all smoke for all WWE. The second video will be, does Vince McMahon have enough evidence to walk away? Thank you all for coming out tonight. And we'll see what happens with Chris Jericho. If anything else do happen, I will cover it at the locker room. Until then, it is O-U-T.